get a word on all the big political stories. There's a lot going on out there. Oscar Reddrop is former special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Afternoon to you, Oscar.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Ian?
Good as gold. Just out of interest, how many conversations do you remember having with the Prime Minister at the time about this very issue? Because I remember talking to a I can say who, a permanent secretary at the Home Office, the permanent secretary, still the same guy, you know who I'm talking about, who said that, you know, when he reads in the press that people don't care, he said, I pull my hair out. We're working 24/7 on this stuff and nothing's moving. So in each individual cog in the wheel says we're trying, but nothing seems to happen. Was this a regular conversation at number 10?
I mean, look, in terms of priorities, you know, illegal immigration was, after the cost of living or alongside it, and obviously COVID at the time, was number one. And, you know, all the talking shops that Conservatives have suffered with, and, you know, the Labour Party, I doubt a lot of people have much hope with their delivery on it, totally fair enough. But the real bit that we got excited about, or felt for the first time that maybe there was some momentum building to prevent illegal immigration into this country, was Rwanda, was the deterrent. And, you know, I know we're talking a lot today about, you know, the PM backing, you know, plans to pay Iraq and Turkey and the like. And, you know, he did a faux press conference last week where he announced the arrest of one dinghy dealer. You know, and it's all good stuff. It's maybe, you know, throwing tons of stuff at the wall, but without that deterrent, then it's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Do you think there's another reality? When people think of Conservatives, we have this sort of, there is, should I say, this stereotypical idea that the Conservatives or Conservative leaders would be, you know, very tough on, you know, things like immigration and the like, and some have been tougher than others. But actually, there's also another type of Conservative, a very liberal Conservative. I would put David Cameron in there, I would put Boris Johnson in there, and I'd probably put Rishi Sunak in there as well, who actually, they're quite relaxed about immigration, even if the numbers are big, legal or illegal.
I think that's fair enough. I think there's that's a platform, if you like, that Reform kind of squeeze onto quite nicely. And I think they've had a lot of joy over the last few years. You know, Tice as an individual, Farage definitely as an individual, and now the party more generally are having a lot of success in talking on those terms. And actually, like, you know, the Conservative Party are no longer conservative. If you want proper policy on illegal immigration, then Reform is your home. Yeah. What I would just slightly defend my previous boss on that front is that, you know, particularly after that Brexit vote in 2019, I think he understood the priorities. But you know, if you are hamstrung and you are not able to get a serious deterrent on its feet, then a lot of this, you know, smash the gangs catchphrases that Keir Starmer likes to sling about will remain as such. It is that deep, it is that shallow, sorry. It is just pure performative catchphrase stuff.
100% it is, and you're absolutely spot on. The smash the gangs thing, I don't know if anybody has yet told him to stop saying it, because there was a point when I wanted to tell Rishi Sunak to stop saying stop the boats, because the boats were not being stopped, and now the smashing the gangs, and as you rightly say, Dave the dinghy dealer, as he shall now be known, has been nicked by the old Bill, and that might well be enough for Mr Starmer to say, hey, look, we smashed the gangs, or, well, we copped Dave, if no one else. Let's look at what else Mr Starmer is up to. He wants to build a new rapport with China. Now, of course, this is very serious business when it comes to the Chinese position in the world, and a lot will depend on what happens in the United States in January and the subsequent years of Mr Trump being back in the saddle. China is a big player. It's the most curious of nations for lots of different reasons. The veneer of, you know, forward-thinking, big business, capitalist society, and underpinning that, of course, a brutal, fairly murderous, dictatorial communist regime. Never quite know how they get away with that, but they do somehow, and that's where we're at. We'll meet Mr Starmer. I'm glad he's meeting him, by the way. He should be meeting him. Will anything come of it, do you think, Oscar?
Look, I mean, Keir Starmer's got a pretty well-trodden track record since he's been PM of doing foreign visits and not really coming back with anything particularly substantive. I agree with you. It's really easy to oppose for the sake of opposing on stuff like this, but it is important, this meeting, I think, even if it is just pure kind of signalling his intent. There is a slight concern, I would say. It's just been briefed out in the last few minutes, actually, that of course, you know, he wanted to use the meetings to tease future meetings, bilateral meetings on things like climate and energy. I'm sure there'll be a lot of groans from your listeners on that for a start, but also that actually maybe down the line stuff on science, technology and military as well. And I think that will raise real question marks. I don't know if that was overzealous, overexcited briefing from Starmer's team, and they haven't quite thought the repercussions of that. But look, you know, in of itself, is this important? China cannot be ignored. Of course, a meeting like this taking place is good. It's been a while. I'd say probably COVID got in the way of that. But I think the other thing, just very quickly, if I may, that a lot of your listeners may be questioning, why does Starmer seem to take such kind of boredom out of being in the country in which he is Prime Minister? I mean, the guy is on an aeroplane every single week, and that's fine. He probably wants to establish himself, or, you know, on the global stage, whatever the hell that means. But I think quite rightly, a lot of people, and particularly those MPs with reform, really sneaking up behind Labour across the country, would be thinking, hang on a minute, mate, I elected you to roll your sleeves up and sort problems for me here in my constituency in the UK.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I can't think of... I mean, I read the number this morning of how many foreign trips he's done since July. I mean, it's an extraordinary number. Look, I understand there's, you know, G7 things go on and, you know, big powwows and, you know, we want our man there to represent us, but there just seems to be an awful lot. I don't know whether this is disproportionate to what would normally happen, but I think he spent more time. At one point, I actually thought he was the president of France, just for a fleeting moment, Oscar. There was just a very brief moment where I thought he's over there so often, maybe he's got a gig we don't know about. But maybe come next year, he'll settle in nicely and do some domestic stuff. Like this, for example, Keir Starmer saying the police should focus on serious crimes like theft, not non-hate crime incidents. We know there's been more than 13,000 last year. And of course, this started, curiously, again, under the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are few things that are more angering to the electorate than the idea that police should be keeping them safe on the streets from, you know, violent crimes, burglary, the list goes on, that they spend time sitting in offices scanning people's social media platforms for, you know, things that don't sound very nice, potentially. Yeah. I get you. I take your point, Ian. I really do. I think the Conservatives probably didn't deal with this, you know, nip it in the bud as quickly as they should have. And, you know, things are only going to get worse on this front under the Labour government, I would kindly suggest. Starmer is right to come out really, you know, in inverted commas, hard on this. Could have come down sooner. He should probably have told his education secretary, who did a morning round, and there was a particularly excruciating segment where she was asked a very softball question on the Times story last week on, you know, I think it was, words that primary school students, you know, hurtful words, someone smelling like fish was reported to the police. And she was given every opportunity to lay out how ridiculous, insane that is, and she wouldn't take it. So I think Starmer needs to get his cabinet around the table and say, can I just remind you all that for the electorate who want delivery and safer communities, this is really enraging for them. Crazy.
Do you know what, Oscar? I think it's actually worse than that. You're absolutely right to identify that moment. I'm familiar with exactly what you're referring to there, that horrendous moment when an education secretary could not deny the ridiculousness of something like this. But Starmer only last week said he supports the idea of databasing comments. I mean, even that phrase, no wonder he's meeting the president of China. They've probably got something in common on that one. Databasing people's comments, it's a good idea, he said.
Absolutely, and the thing that every listener should hold very dear at this moment in time and think about is that if it can happen to Alison, Pearson, who was a really wonderful, very much so now as well, high-profile journalist, then it's in some ways it's not about her, and I'm sure she said this herself. Actually, it can happen to each and every one of us, and freedom of speech. It all sounds a bit cringe, it's dying out, but actually, when you see instances like this, and you see that kind of mission creep, if you like, or just to collect a bit of this and collect a bit of that, and before you know it, people are not able to voice concerns about the society in which they live. And I think your listeners should, and I'm sure they will and do, fight against that very strongly.
Spot on. And here's another story as well. Young people face losing benefits if they don't take up training. I was slightly staggered to realise how many people, 1 in 8 young people, 874,000, aged 16 to 24, are neither in education or employment or in any kind of training. Apparently mental health is the main reason behind it. But this is an astronomical figure. Liz Kendall, Work and Pension Secretary, is she right to push ahead with a plan to tackle this with some kind of penalty to your benefits if you don't at least turn up for an interview?
Well, I think in principle, yes. I think the Times, who wrote it up today, acknowledged actually in the article that there's very little detail and substance at this stage. It's more of a kind of a framework and an idea, if you like. In principle, I fully get it, as someone, and again, not to be too self-indulgent or cringy about it, but as someone who has suffered, with mental health problems, for example, in the past, structure, getting out there, purpose, resilience, purpose is everything. And I think that should be encouraged by a government. In terms of these employers who are now expected to, find the roles and take on these, younger people, I think the NIC's rise for these employers in the budget the other month is really, really problematic, and they'll be probably pulling their hair out, saying there's probably a young boy or young girl that I could have taken on and taken a punt on them, which is, we forget, most people get their first jobs, because someone's taking a punt on you, and now you've raised the insurance on my business. I can't afford to do that now, so it doesn't seem like particularly joined up thinking. But in principle, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's anyone just sat on the sofa who's 19 years old now without any purpose in life, then because they maybe they have mental health problems, COVID, they've been in a bit of a funk ever since then I think the government is probably right to say to them, look, you getting out there, having purpose and structure is the best thing, not just for you, but for society. But we'll see, because this is kind of classic Tony Blair politics. Yes. This is, it's a reheat, and we'll see the substance in time, I'm sure. I'm
surprised you didn't introduce a league table, because that seemed to be another one of their favourite. Let's get a league table in there. Absolutely. You're right. Oscar, thank you. Great to have you on with us. Oscar Reddrop, former special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was the Prime Minister. Thank you to him.